What is going on? My name is Michael Hacker, and this is the Hacker Outdoors podcast. Today I am joined by both Brian Hacker and Joey McCormack. We talk a little bit about the WSL revised tour schedule before jumping into the FLW Lake Murray event that Joey did fish a couple weekends ago. Joey goes through some of his prep for the big show and his tips and techniques for catching bass. I hope you enjoy this. We even jump in a little bit with some point break antics along the way. And without further ado, we'll start here. This will be the introduction. Welcome to the latest edition of the Hacker Outdoors podcast. I am joined today with Brian Hacker and Joey McCormack. Without further ado, we will jump into a few things, including a request from a listener to go into some details regarding Joey's Lake Murray fishing trip, where we don't just talk about how cold it is. We'll talk about the actual fish and, tips and techniques that actually work down there. But before we do that, I figured, Brian, you had some news on the WSL?
Yeah. So the World Surf League came out with their revised schedule finally in Australia. I don't know if you heard about the show, but they're running 4 events in Australia. I guess with the COVID restrictions, they had to adapt schedule a little bit because they can't jump between the different states. So they're running, I guess the first one's going to be, let me just check the list. Yeah, it is Newcastle. The second one being Narrabeen, third being Margaret River, and fourth Rottnest, which is the island off the western coast of Australia. Which is super interesting. That one is there's 2 extremely sharky events here being, I love Margaret River event because you can run the box, but both spots are super sharky that time of year. So it'd be fun to watch.
What was that fourth one?
Rottnest.
Wow. All right.
Yeah. That's how you pronounce it. It's that you always see like crystal clear blue water, but guys in wetsuits, and there's, a handful of spots. I think they're running at the real famous right-hand point break that's there. But yeah, it's super sharky, like Joe said. So
last time they were down south, they had to move the event to another spot due to sharks.
Yeah, they moved it
years ago. Yeah,
they moved to south to North Point from running when they were running at Margaret River.
Yeah, it was Margaret River.
Yeah,
to move.
So I think it'd be fun to watch. There's two beach break events, which if they get good swell, I'll be seeing guys punt and do airs and stuff, and then 2 big west side of Australia events where we're going to see some big waves and open water swell and some other hazards in the water.
Some other hazards.
Men in gray suits. So
men in the gray suits. Did you see that? I think I shared it with you, Brian. Joe, did you see it? The video of the shark attacking the spear fisherman?
I did. I saw the message. I didn't look at it. It was pretty crazy.
Oh my God, dude! I'll post it on the story. It was nuts. I love sharks. I'm gonna start by saying that, and I think I respect the heck out of them, but they scare the ever living bejesus out of me, man. Like I have no interest in doing that. Australia is, it's one of those places that is just nuts. There was a video too. It was some sort of duck or goose or something like that was sitting in the water. I don't know if I sent that to you, Brian. The saltwater crocodile, I think they can move up to like 23 miles an hour. It looked like it had literally a prop engine on the back of it moving across the water. I don't think I've ever seen anything move that quickly in the natural world on the surface of the water. Like, nah, I'm good. Yeah. Screw that. That's pretty cool though.
they're
figuring stuff out.
It'd be fun to watch. People need some entertainment, and I know they struggle with trying to figure out the logistics of it, how to get people there, and it looks like they worked it out. It's gonna be weird not having Bell's Beach on the tour for the first time, I think, ever, to be honest. But they got the restrictions and kind of is what it is, and we're gonna see some new stuff, which will be fun to watch.
Well, they're waiting for the 50-year storm, of course.
Well, that's for sure. Year. That's this year.
What
actually on the phone with Patrick Swayze, and it's happening. They're on their way.
Watch that week. It usually runs. It's usually the week of Easter. I bet you there's a giant swell that weekend, and they're gonna shake their heads and realize what they missed.
Where am I going to go? Am I going to paddle to Fiji? Come on, Utah.
Sides.
You let him go. No,
He's
I didn't.
Not coming back.
What a great scene,
He's
man.
not coming back.
Via con Dios. And yeah, so let's pivot from there now that we've had our point break fill for the day. MLF. I'm sorry, MF. You put MFL, Joe.
It's MLF FLW.
Yeah, there we
Big
go.
Five. MLF
Big
FLW Big Five. It is the
go.
red crest for the MLF, which is their championship. It actually started, I think, yesterday. And they're making ready to cut. It goes on tomorrow. Got Brian Thrift in the lead. I mean, he's a big guy. Ottofo's up there. Kevin Van Dam's up there, and David Dudley. So they've been slaying them. It actually had to be moved due to weather to Lake Eufaula. It was supposed to be closer down to Texas, but with the weather they had, it actually was in Texas. They moved it last minute, which was kind of interesting. These guys were all prepared. Literally, I think they made the announcement on Friday, maybe of last week, or maybe even Monday, that it was being moved. No, it was Friday. When everybody's getting ready to travel, they announced that it was being moved to Eufaula, which definitely threw a huge curveball in there. And they're catching some big fish. The largest so far has been 7 pounds, I believe. Yeah, 7's the big fish of the tournament so far. And they're breaking down the top 20 tomorrow, so it should be good. And there's a lot of big names in there. A lot of big names in that top 20. So see how that goes.
Is that a lake they normally fish at some point, or is this just a completely new water?
Eufaula is a very well-known bass lake that tourists stop there all the time, pretty much yearly, whether it's MLF, FLW, or the Elite Series. So they know that lake. They do know that lake. But telling you, Optifo is probably going to win it. That's my pick, but we'll see. The MLF schedules, the way they do it, it's different. So tomorrow, once you get to the top 20, all their weights reset. So everybody's at 0. So it's really anybody's game if you make it to those last days. I'm not a big fan of the format, every fish counts kind of deal, but it's still fun to watch.
Yeah, definitely. What so if you were on new water like that, let's say, on the fly they change it on you, what would your, I know today we're going to get a discussion about a lot of the stuff, but I was thinking about it after our discussion last week, Mike, how when you're fly fishing for trout, it's kind of your feeler, what I call a feeler fly, when you're trying to fish new water for the first time, see what fish are biting. We use a woolly bugger. And we were talking about what rods, we would use with what setups, in new water. And for bass, my question to you is what do you think the guys, first time they do, they go find their spots, what would they cast out to kind of just feel out the water first day?
I think with MLF, you only get like a day and a half of practice. They would have moving bait. They would have moving baits on, just trying to cover as much water as they can, trying to find where the fish are at, and then adjust from there. This time of year down there, they're just about to be on beds. It's cold, so normal year they'd be about spawning down there in Alabama. I mean, they're really, really close. So it's pre-spawn. The fish are eating a ton of bait, and there's probably going to be some on beds. So they're going to be throwing white chartreuses, moving baits. Crawl colors will come into play this time of year. But that's what they do. A lot of times when you practice for events, they just want to cover water and find where the fish are. So they'll be throwing a crankbait or spinnerbait, chatterbait, Alabama rig, something to cover a lot of water to pinpoint where the fish are feeding or where they're at or what stage they're at. And then once you kind of dial into that, you'll make adjustments. So that's it. So usually once you find the fish and you figure out what stage they're in, they can dial in from there. And it's usually back to match the hatch. But if they're on beds, when fish are on beds, they'll eat anything you throw in front of the bed. They attack it. So, a lot of times what they'll do, if they're fishing beds, they'll find the beds, they'll power pole down and they'll flip creature baits, or they'll flip worms, Sinkos, drop shots, and go from there. But moving baits to cover water.
I think that's a good entry point, Brian, that you brought us to for Joe to talk about Lake Murray a little bit more, right? We kind of talked about the temperature. We talked a little bit, notes from the field about what it was you were planning on doing. Now, in a perfect world, you would have been down there the day before, the day and a half before to practice. You would have followed the same kind of prescription, so to speak, where you would just be trying to find them. and get any kind of hits you want, and then just marking them on your GPS and coming back the day of the tournament, if you were the boater, of course.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, so with the FLW, you can practice 5 days before the event. And actually, the week before that practice week, it's shut down to competitors. But anytime before that week, you can fish. You can pre-fish. So you only have 1 week where you can't, and the week before is practice. That same type of deal. I mean, that time of year down there, fish are going to be getting ready to come up on beds. I actually talked to Brennan today, and it was 75 degrees, and where he was fishing, the fish are just about there, especially with the full moon and the new moon coming. They're just about to go on beds. So when we were down Lake Murray, I'm not going to give up the juice. I'm not going to give up Brennan's juice and my juice because
no, of course
not. Yeah,
no juice is being given up. But with that temperature switch, before it came down, the water temperatures were hovering just below 60. I was told some spots in the river were up to like 62. They said, they did have warm weather. And that drop in the temperature was severe, and it lowered the water temperatures anywhere from 54 to, I think the lowest I saw was 50, 49. But the fish, the bass, were still schooling on shad and just chasing the bait fish in the creeks or onto points and just gorging themselves on shad. Like I said, their lips, they say like they had lipstick on it. Their lips looked like they had bright red lipstick, like on their top lip. You can see in some of the pictures. And that is just simply from them getting ready to spawn and just eating so much. I mean,
Can I ask you a question on that, Joe?
Yeah.
So when you say that they're feasting up on these shad that are in these like little creeks and tributaries leading into the
they're
lake.
chasing them. So what they'll do, the bass will sit off the points in a little deeper water, like,
And are you watching this though?
Oh yeah, in the morning. I mean, throughout the day there was different blitzes you would see where you would see just balls of bait just breaking the water and bass just crushing them. I mean, there was one point on the boat, it's probably like 1 o'clock. I mean, literally on the side of the boat, a bass came up and his mouth was like this and just went and just ate this bait fish. Like, holy shit.
That's
like
awesome.
It was bizarre. But what they'll do before they spawn, they're eating to get ready to go make sweet, beautiful love with the females. So they're getting, hardy. They literally they'll ambush. They'll sit in the deeps and ambush and push all the bait. They'll try to push all the bait into an area and just gorge. So a lot of guys down there this time of year, because people want to know, we'll throw like shad traps, so Rapala bait, pretty much. Any crankbait that mimics the fish down there or moving bait, the bait fish like white, silver, chartreuse, you can't really go wrong. The key was finding the bass and finding where they were gorging themselves on.
So when you're going into this as a co-angler, right, and remind me again the boater you were with.
And her name is Anastasia.
Yeah. So Anastasia has a game plan. You're along for the ride, right? As a co-angler, she has done her due diligence as far as, having been there, and she's from the area. She knows exactly kind of where she wants to begin, right? Has she been tracking their movements, I guess, from being in the area and fishing the pre-game or the pre-event?
Well, when you grow up in an area or you are from a certain area, you can pretty much pinpoint when the bass are going to be at that certain stages in their cycles. Weather can throw a curveball and cause them to spawn late and cause them to spawn early, but it usually always falls in that same type of window. Like March 27th is Santee Cooper, and I can tell you they're going to be spawning. They're going to be fish who've already spawned, and then other fish who are spawning at that period, and probably some who might still be pre-spawn.
Okay.
It kind of goes by water temperature. If you go online, it'll tell you like a certain temperature range where that's where they'll start spawning. It's not always dead on, but it's pretty close.
So would you say that, I like to think of myself as a leisure fisherman, right, Brian? I think you would agree, right? Like we just go out when we're free and we fish. But for someone going into a competition, are you taking a more scientific approach to understanding the life cycle of the bass, the breeding habits of the bass, the feeding habits, you're talking about moon cycles, you're talking about, barometric readings, you're talking about all these things. Is that something that you're taking into account going into a tournament?
Well, if you're good and you know what you're doing, you definitely should know that stuff. 'Cause it definitely helps big time to know where these fish are going to be at, what their forage is, because not every lake or river system has the same forage that another one will have. It could be completely different. You go up to upstate New York now, there's gobies. Gobies don't exist down south. Yeah, so down south they have, herring, a lot of herring lakes. We don't have those here. So it's always good to know, if you want to fish competitively, you do need to know that stuff, and you do, even as a co-angler, you should be studying the lake beforehand and figuring that out, because it definitely leads to success and help moving on.
And I'll interject if I can there. I think in talking with you when you came up and we fished a bit, right? We fished, what was it, 2 bodies of water from the canoe. You made me look at things a little bit differently than just a normal leisure fisherman. Now, I think, any fisherman or outdoorsman or outdoorswoman or fisherwoman has a more acute sense of the world around them, right? Like I notice, insect hatches. I'm noticing a little glistening of movement under the water. Noticing just things that most people wouldn't, like the way that a tree is laying over over a section of the water, or rhododendron bushes along, a bank of a river, for example. Like these things all stand out to me, and I make a mental note. Okay, that's where I want to try, or that's something's going on here. I need to now switch up. And you really helped me understand a little bit more the scientific aspect of bass, and even at my home lake here, right? Like it was just mind-numbing. Like I had been fishing there for months, and you took me out there and you pointed out things that I, even with all the observational skills I had, that I didn't catch on to. But when you taking it to the level that you're going to Lake Murray, you're going to these other competitions, and you're a co-angler, it's got to be sometimes frustrating to be a co-angler to a certain extent, but it's also interesting, right? Because you're learning from the boater who's probably from that area, like you were in this. I mean, from what I've seen and from what you've told me about Anastasia, she was a fantastic angler and she knew what she was doing. But you may not always be able to go where it is you wanted to go on the lake or river or whatever.
So if you have the reputation of a good co, there is guys, especially if you're fishing bodies of water that the co is real familiar with, who, will ask you for spots or ask your opinion, and especially if they're new to the area, you can do that. I mean, I've done it before, on competitions of the Potomac. The Potomac can be a really tough body of water if you don't know it and it's tidal. A lot of guys, don't fish tidal. I had a tournament. I fished with a guy from North Carolina, and he wasn't a big tidal guy, and we fished all my spots, and I think he ended up in 4th, and I ended up in, it's like 16th. So
Oh wow.
You do get that opportunity sometimes, but not often. But sometimes the boaters learn from you, because you could be throwing something they've never thrown before, and
Right.
you can wreck them. And
Well, I think that's kind of what it was I was talking about, right? So for like the home lake, for example, we were doing, I won't give up my juice, but he swapped me up to some form of artificial that I've never used before, and showed me a technique that I would have never used before. And it's always interesting to fish with different people and get that. Now, I'm a big fly fisherman, and I moved almost to 100% fly any type of fishing I've done, and been pretty successful bass fishing with it, because it's just so much fun catching a bass on a fly rod. But I still love my spinning rod, and it was cool, even bringing Donna out and using it and understanding now different techniques is huge that I would have never used before. But I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on that, because I think the next stage is, so you're down in Lake Murray, obviously you're showing up day one, you're in the middle of this cold spell down there. You basically, everything that you had prepared to do, because you've now done your research, you know what the weather's going to be like, you know what's going on as far as the bass life cycle is, that you pretty stayed true to that. And you said that last podcast that you stayed true to what your plan was, and it pretty much worked.
So,
So
I think from the field, from notes, I was saying crankbaits would play, chatterbaits, finesse, different types of finesse, whether it be a Cinco, Ned rig, so on would play. And that spinner baits, Alabama rig, and that was the case. I wasn't, the weather can affect the fish, but I was more worried about what the water temperature was. And that's how I kind of keyed into what they would be doing or not doing, and what I would throw based on that. Because if the water went really, really cold, it would be a whole nother game. But it stayed warmer, even though with the cold air, and the fish stayed in that cycle where they were at, and it didn't affect them much. So, if you can go back, there's some videos. There's a couple guys who down there, I think it's Sob Fishing. He's a Lake Murray guy and he's a really big YouTuber. He fishes the tournaments, and he filmed the event from his end, and he was throwing, cranks, Alabama rig, moving baits. I mean, he caught a limit. That's the big thing, just kind of knowing where you're at, what these fish eat, what they're going to be doing certain times a year. Sometimes it doesn't work out, but a lot of times it will get you on the right pattern.
now, not to labor the point, but I think, maybe Brian would agree with me here, someone who's not done a tournament before, and for some of the people who have not, when you're getting to spot one, what does that look like? What are you experiencing? What are you like? How do you, in your mind, what are you saying? Do you go even before we're actually arriving at spot one? Are you like, I'm going to use this rod that's already set up with the crankbait or with the net rig or whatever it is you're throwing? Or are you basically like, I'm going to see what happens when we get there because I don't really know where we're going at Lake Murray?
Let's see. I didn't bring all my rods actually in Murray because that was how confident I was when I was going to throw. I think I only brought 6. There is times, like in certain bodies of waters, where you might want to be pounding the shore, fishing, 0 to 6 feet, and you're all rigged for that, but your boater wants to fish 20 to 30 feet. And then that's when you got to kind of change on the water. Where we fished was kind of what I was thinking we were going to fish. And so I knew when we put up in the first spot, and I saw where she put us on, I went to my first choice, which was a finesse presentation. We were fishing docks, creeks with docks that's at a little deeper water, anywhere from 4 to 10 feet. So everything I had tied on and wanted to throw was set for that, fishing anywhere from 14 feet to 4 feet. And just so happened she was on the same type of pattern that I was, and picked up what I wanted to throw, and pretty much threw that most of the day. And I threw a crankbait too some. It was between a finesse presentation and a crank for the day, and that was really it. I threw the chatterbait a little bit too, but believe it or not, the water was extremely clear for all that rain they were having. That was surprising to me. I think that the visibility was close to 9 feet, 6, 8 foot range you could see down. So that kind of limits you too. When the water's clear like that, you don't want to throw something that is you want to throw realistic looking baits, because the water's clear, the fish are gonna get a better look. A little bit more stain is where you can get away with some of the baits that aren't as realistic looking. And we just, Brennan and I have prepared heavily for this year. I prepared real heavily for the Northeast last year, which I'm fishing the Northeast again this year, and I'm preparing for that. But South Carolina, him and I have really put our time into that division and planning. Like, we've been on the phone every day for I've been home for 2 weeks from that. We're going on 2 weeks. Every day we talk about the next event and what we plan on throwing or what we should have, or we discuss. Like today, was on the phone with him for an hour. We were discussing, where we think these fish are going to be come the 27th. If they're going to be on beds or what, so that's the kind of preparation I put into it and he puts into it. And I know other co's who do the same, and the ones who do that are the ones who are successful. And then when they go up to boater, they carry that over. I'll go as far as, Santee Cooper. I'll go look at tournament results from last year till 8 years earlier, just to study, and that paid off for me at the Potomac last year. I looked at the tournament that was there 7 years earlier, and some people believe fish work like in 5-6 year patterns. Well, what they were throwing 7 years ago at that time at a pro tournament there is what won it for the Toyota Series. Most people wouldn't do that, but it's good to know that,
Definitely.
So
this morning I was go ahead, Joe.
No, go ahead, B.
I was gonna say this morning I was cracking up. I came down here in my basement. I was doing some work and I found my my ultralight rod. It reminded me of a quick story that involves you. Last time we fished together, we had some family outing at a local lake in where my nephews and brother-in-law fish all the time, and we were all fishing from the docks. I don't know if you remember this. And
I do.
we're fishing the docks, and it was late summer, late afternoon, and no one was catching anything. And there was other people fishing too, but still nobody was catching anything other than our family. And you came over, like, let me get a cast. So you take my rod, same lure. And funny enough, that lure that I'm using, I'm not giving the sauce here, but I can tell everyone we were using top water. You're the one who put me on those originally when we were kids. And we were on the Allegheny River. I'm not giving away spots again, but in the Allegheny River, and that's when you turned me on to using that specific lure. But all you changed was pattern and speed, and you caught.
That fish was big.
It was.
My leg wasn't broken. I didn't look so stupid. I would share the picture. That was over a 3-pound fish.
I was gonna say it was under well 5, but over 3 easily.
It was every bit of probably a 4.
Yep. And then you had, I don't know if you remember that, after you threw them back, you had at least 2 chases after.
Yeah.
And
a lot of times with topwater or any other baits, even crankbaits, I could tell you I could be fishing the river or pond next to your house and say I caught them in a crankbait. You could go out there and you could throw that exact crankbait and not catch them because my cadence could be completely different in how I work it. And you got it. That's another part of it too. You got to figure that cadence. Like I will give this up down there with the crankbait bite on Murray. They didn't want you just straight wind, and they were hitting it. You'd wind, you give it a pause, and they would hit on that pause. Which
now, so when you're doing that though, like, are you obviously don't know that going into the tournament, right? So you're trying whatever it is you can while you're tossing that bait along, and we'll say the crankbait because that's what you were just talking about. You're trying different cadences. How long are you going? Like, do you break it down? And I think it's like the little, ADHD thing in me that says like, okay, well, it's got to be 10, right? Or like 10, 15, reel-ins before I change it up. Or is it just kind of, you're just doing it for a handful, you don't get a bite, you're going to change up the cadence, going to change up the depth, or whatever it is you're doing?
Pretty much that. A lot of times with the crankbait, what I'll do is I'll do my pauses after it deflects off something. So like I'm fishing wood, and when you're fishing a crankbait and you're fishing the right depth, you can feel it just digging the bottom or deflecting. And when it hard deflects, sometimes I'll just pause and then just reel, and they'll bite it right there. Same, with the chatterbait. There's people who just straight burn a chatterbait, and they're like, I can't catch them on a chatterbait. Well, there's certain cadences, or you got to break it up. Like there's times when you're throwing a paddle tail swim bait on a weighted hook, and sometimes you can burn it and they'll eat it, but sometimes you got to fish it so slow and kill it and just let it, and they'll eat it. It's just all about kind of time on the water, and experience kind of really helps with that, but also just playing with it. Like, if you're throwing something for, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 minutes or 20 minutes, you're not getting a bite, and you think you have the right thing, will change your cadence a little bit, like topwater. Sometimes they want you burning a popper, for example. They want you just pop, pop, pop and burn it. Sometimes they want you just like pop, sit till the rings go. Pop, let it sit till the rings go. It all depends. It really all depends on the day.
Ryan's
Like
the
we
master of the popper.
Yeah, I experienced this with you too down in Florida. I remember we were fishing for largemouths, and it was a soft plastic we were using. I won't tell everybody which one it was, but I was catching fish, and you weren't at first. And you're like, "What?" You walked over to me at one point. You're like, "What are you doing different?" And I told you what I was doing. And once again, it was changing the cadence of the retrieve. And you made the change, and then you caught. Well, actually, we should post a picture. That's the picture on this one. You caught a monster.
I think I do have that on there. Yeah, that
Yeah,
was
and
unbelievable.
you literally all you did was you changed, and that was it. I told you exactly what I was doing. You made the change, and boom, you caught the biggest fish of the day, which was over 5 pounds. And
Beautiful fish.
yeah, it's
That's
worth
a good
noting
point.
for sure.
Even with finesse, because I'll throw the drop shot. Even with the finesse, I mean, sometimes that they want it like dead slack. Sometimes they want it, you know, moving a little bit. It just really all depends. And you just got to kind of figure it out. Time in the water is, if you really want to improve at fishing, it time in the water, like Michael was saying, it trains your eye. You'll start seeing things you would not have noticed if you're only out there every so often. And those things can really key you in to what you should be throwing or what you should change.
That's got to
Like
be
anything
hard,
else.
right, Joe? Like when you're fishing different bodies of water in a tournament, like you don't have every body of water is so different. They're similar in the sense that it's water and there's like an ecosystem that you're dealing with, right? And you're going after the same species, but it's so different because there's so many other variables that come into play. So how, like, to me, that's got to be mind-numbingly difficult. Like I can't tell you how many times the lake you and I went to, the first lake you and I went to, like that was, I want to say probably the 12th, 13th, maybe 15th time I had been there, and it just getting destroyed, like having a hard time fishing that water. Now I had success fishing the shore there, but never on my boat. Like it just, it takes time on a body of water to do it. And being in a tournament circuit, you don't really have that time where you can spend and say, okay, this is going to be my local water for the season where I'm going to figure it out and finally, catch the species that I'm targeting. And for me, it's a little bit different because I was targeting different things other than bass, but it's still got to be hard.
Well, that's where that studying comes into place and being a well-rounded fisher person, There's some guys who just will say they're power fishermen and they'll only throw bait A, B, C. And there's some guys who say I'm only finesse and they'll only throw finesse. That's where, if you want to be successful, you have to be well-rounded and versed and willing to change to succeed. Tidal water, a lot of people have a hard time fishing tidal water. And that was tough learning. That can make you rethink your fishing career because, low tide, the bite it will turn, like the tide will start dropping and you might have an hour where you just slam them and then it's done. And it takes a while to learn how to catch those fish in the different tide cycles, whether it be high tide, dead slack, or low. And that takes a while. And you'll see, a lot of these guys who fish a lot of lake systems or rivers that are non-tidal just have a miserable time on tidal water and despise it. Just be like, I'm done. The guy I fished with the Potomac who got a fourth, I took him to my spots. I mean, I got in the boat with him. He's like, I hate this place. I've been here for a week. I want to go home. We've caught nothing but one or two. And then, he goes out with me. I put him on the spots and, there you go.
Crushes it.
But that was a lot. I put a lot of time into the tidal water around here. And there's still days I can go out there and just want to bang my head into the wall afterwards. That's where it's tough. Wait till you get on tidal. You're muted, Mike.
Yeah, there we go. I was gonna say it's like fishing the ocean, right? And figuring that out as well, right? Like you're talking about a tidal body of water. It's until you're there and you actually put the time on the water and figure it out yourself. I mean, you can catch fish any tide, but you still have to figure it out. Like you're not gonna just show up and do it. Like it's completely different than fishing the rivers and the lakes by us up here. These are non-tidal bodies.
I've also fished with people who think, we're not going to catch anything. The guy's so ingrained in their head that we're only going to catch them during low tide that they pretty much throw that all other period away. And if you believe that and you go by that, you're putting yourself only in a 1 hour window maybe where the fish will really just come alive and come eating, and then you're screwing yourself for the tournament. You need to be able to go out there and fish all those tides and figure out how to catch them at those other tides. And that's how you're going to win, or that's how you're going to get top 30s, top 20s.
Yeah. Well, I think that was a great insight. I really appreciate you give us a little bit more feedback on that, Joe. I know I've picked your brains a bit about it over the past couple of years, right? And I think I've become a better bass fisherman from learning from you and talking with you. And you surround yourself with people that are better than you at things, and you kind of tend to level up, and that's in everything in your life, right? So I appreciate everything that you do, and I got nothing. Brian, how about you?
We got nothing else either. That was a solid one.
Agreed.
I guess
Agreed.
the best advice I can give is, if you want to enter this realm, like anything else, you got to perfect it. There is a bit of studying and time on the water. And with the internet and YouTube nowadays, you can't learn everything, but there's definitely channels out there who can help you and kind of get you in that direction. Brennan said he read some, because he's been reading a lot about fish biology, and he said he read somewhere that's like 90% of fishermen don't catch them well. It's the 10%, that catch them incredibly because they put the time and the work in. And I'm telling you, I've seen it through and through, and it's the truth. Like, I know everybody doesn't have all the time in the world, but if you want to get better at fishing, you should try to get out when you can, and just it will eventually click.
Yeah, and read up on entomology.
Yeah, entomology.
That's
You need to do
important.
that. You need to start scuba diving and look at structure underwater.
Well, like when we fish rivers, like you're lifting rocks and looking to see what's scurrying out from under them. That's,
you need to know what they for. If you're targeting bass and you're fishing Lake Eufaula, you need to know what bait fish are in that body of water that those bass are they're eating. Because if you go down there and you think they're eating, I don't know, let's just pick any blue-back herring, let's say, right? And you're throwing blue-black herring colors, but there's no blue-black herring in there. I'm sure you'll get some to bite it, but not as good as, if they're eating shad and you knew that they were eating gizzard shad and you were throwing gizzard shad colors. So it's really key to learn that, and it's easy. Nowadays with Google, you can just
find it up.
Lake Eufaula Lake Eufaula bass forage, and ding ding, it's all there.
Was it the shad?
Was it the shad in Murray?
No, that was a joke. That was a movie reference. Brian got.
Oh. What movie was it?
I honestly don't remember. What was it? Was it
Charlie's Angels?
Tom Green. Yeah, Charlie's Angels. It was Tom Green and Charlie's Angels. Was it the Chad? He says Chad, but we always say shad. And every time we fish, it's like, was it the shad? Yeah, stupid movie humor.
Freddy Got Fingered's one of the greatest movies of all time.
Oh my God, it was
he got arrested filming that.
Did he really?
Did he?
In Bloomfield.
Wasn't
that one?
Really?
I think it was that one.
Was it really?
There's one where his mom runs off with Shaquille O'Neal's Freddy Got Fingered.
No, wasn't it the one with Drew Barrymore? Never Been
Yeah,
Kissed
something
or
with something with Drew Barrymore.
Yeah. But I remember
because they were filming that at the where we grew up.
I think it was at the Green across from the high school.
Yeah, I remember that. That's right.
Yeah.
Holy cow, that's a flashback. He's one of the earliest pioneers of podcasting. Tom Green.
Yeah.
He's the OG. So,
he's OG for sure. He's Canadian too. Can't go wrong there.
I guess not. Well, I think that's about all we got today, everyone. We appreciate you listening. Joe, thank you for your tales from beyond the dirty.
I'll have some more come March 13th and then March 27th. So
I like it.
Coming up. And we're going to have notes from the field coming up for me too. We'll leave that as a teaser. And, hopefully some more YouTube videos coming up. Brian found his GoPro, which is awesome. I don't know how old it is, but maybe we'll at least get like 240.
No, it's a full HD. It doesn't shoot. I don't think it's 4K, but I think it's 1080.
Probably.
Yeah, they've been 1080 for a while now.
Yeah.
I will have one in the next 2 weeks. So.
Oh, epic. Yeah,
Cool.
be
We
good.
will have video from Potomac and from Santee. So
I like it.
Let's do it. Well, everyone, thanks again for tuning in, and we'll talk next week.
all right,
Awesome.
later, guys.
All right, so that was the Hacker Outdoors podcast with Michael Hacker, Brian Hacker, and of course, Joey McCormack. If you like what you heard, please give us a rating on whatever platform you're listening to or watching this on. Please check the show notes for some links about the topics we discussed today. And as always, we thank you for listening.